Let us ask the question, art, what's the point of this luxury? Yes, art is expensive. The conductor Christoph Att, a good friend of mine, formerly a professor at the Music University in Zurich, gave us an interview for a book which we published in German. Here is the translation into English. Years ago, I was involved in a performance of a work by Karlheinz Stockhausen. I made my own private estimate of what the whole thing was likely to cost. This came out to around 1 million, for there were 4 orchestras and 4 choirs involved. Elaborate constructional changes had to be made to the hall for the project. The number of seats, on the other hand, was limited to 400. The price of admission was 30, and half of those attending were invited guests anyway. Is this defensible in political and social terms? It's a banal truth. Art costs money, a lot of money. That's why in countries where the state is involved in cultural institutions, hefty political discussions recur frequently. Even if creators and supporters of culture are very disinclined to having to reflect on the value and task of art, I think there is no way around the need to present good arguments when it comes to the political discussion. Or maybe when artists are asking themselves, what am I doing? Am I producing a luxury product? Or maybe these questions comes from outside, maybe from dear brothers and sisters in churches. Now Christoph Att says, I think it is remarkable. I think that society, even if it is completely unaware of the fact, is changed simply by the existence of such music. Music, theatre, dance and other art forms do in fact represent something like the seasoning mixed into our society, even if only a small part of the population takes note of it. Now we will talk later about the question, could we disseminate arts to a larger population? Christoph Att continues, culture is of course actively absorbed only by a small elite in the population. He thinks of specific art, such as the works of Karlheinz Stockhausen. It's absorbed only by a small elite in the population, and there it continues to have its outworkings. And then this elite in turn becomes relevant and effective in society and politics, also in ways going far beyond pure cultural politics. This seasoning works not only by its quantity, but by its quality. As a further example, one could take literature. Who still reads at all nowadays? But who nevertheless would dare to maintain that books could make no impression on our society or even change it? The same is true with music. Even almost unnoticed works, but of convincing quality, are important for our society and often prove to have a great effect. Let us draw a parallel to faith. Although Jesus assures us Christians that we are the salt of the earth, we ourselves are hardly aware of this. And is it something society notices at all? I doubt it. But if this assurance is true, then it tells us that this quality does not depend on being generally perceptible. If I now turn back to the music again, back to Stockhausen's work Carré from the year 1959, it is undeniable that it did indeed unleash a political discussion, first in Germany and then worldwide. So far, Christoph Ott. So, is art an unnecessary luxury product? Is it only a luxury product or a product only meant for elites? Yes and no. In recent years, politicians and cultural institutions have attached increasing importance to the very important cultural education. Cultural education of children and as well of adults. As a result, culture directly influences opinion in wide social circles, and this is very good and very important. And it shapes, of course, the atmosphere of a whole society, hopefully in a good way. Yes, at this point, at the latest, the question arises, what culture and what opinions are being disseminated here? And what culture is being absorbed or respected and integrated into the whole society from which circles of society? There is nothing new in recognizing that culture is a playing field and as well a field of battle for opinions, worldviews, aesthetic concepts. Now it's essential, I think, to spend some thoughts to this matter. Essential for especially artists who are Christians, and why not essential as well for churches, asking the question, how can they be part of this educational process and the whole culture in a society? Of course, there's a further very fundamental question: is cultural education still possible with young people today in the digital area? A story. Recently, a Hungarian scholar in the field of culture, Dr. Zoltán Körösvölgyi, told about an observation he made. He told it in a context of an art conference we had in Budapest. His observation he made was the following. In an art gallery, he saw a teacher in front of a school class. The large group of primary school pupils sat in front of a modern painting and listened attentively, even over a prolonged period, to the teacher's explanations. Zoltán asked the teacher afterwards how he achieved this. His answer was that he placed trust in the people's ability to take an interest in even complex art historical contexts. This means art, do we call it luxury product or not, can find many elites in our society as well among pupils. Another key word I would like to mention is the term participation. Marcel Duchamp, he lived between 1887 and 1968, was a remarkable visual artist. He is well known by his ready-mades. He found, for example, on a street a wheel and brought it to the museum without having touched it with his artistic hands. So he closed, in a way, or tried to close the gap between society, daily life, and the museum with its luxury art. Marcel Duchamp gave us this formulation: seen as a whole, the creative act is not carried out by the artist alone. The audience member brings the work into contact with the eternal world by decoding and interpreting its inner qualifications, and thus adding his contribution to the creative act. Now, what does it mean? It's not so easy to understand it. It is a thought we find as well later in Umberto Eco's concept of the open artwork. The audience should be involved and should participate in the work of art somehow. Or we can say there should be a space for the audience which should not be put only in the role of being passive. The keyword participation has given rise in recent decades to a debate which is continuing today. The central question is, how can the traditional art industry be somehow broken down if it is an art industry which is creating an authoritarian, undemocratic separation between artists and passive audience? This is at least the wording of some of the debaters. Do we agree or not? It is a good question. How can art create spaces for the audience to be somehow be involved? How can this be achieved? I would talk about a keystone in this debate where artists as well are involved with their work. It was 2010 when Marina Abramovic created a performance at the MoMA, The Artist is Present. Abramovic sat on a chair for 7 hours every day, and visitors could take a seat facing her in silence as long as they wanted. It was interesting and remarkable that queues of in totally 1 million people were standing in front of the MoMA around the blocks waiting for entrance. Apparently there was a wish to participate into the artwork and meeting the artist and being part of an art performance. This means there is some gap between artists and normal people. The debate also questions the concept of art. Is there a need for destabilizing the concept of art? Could it be that maybe even a social project as the construction of drinking water fountains, wells, could be considered as artworks, where a community of people who are not necessarily close to art can be involved? Now that's the question of a group, or a group who use the term of dialogical aesthetics. Now we see this is an interesting end of other end of the spectrum. On the one hand, we think that art is only for elite, and on the other hand, art is for everybody, and even everybody is an artist, as Joseph Beuys says. Now, is there Christian point of view. I could go on, of course, with these questions, and there are many very good contributions. Libraries have been written about this topic. Is there a Christian view on this? Perhaps rather there are some key points which can mark out a field for a discussion. I would present 4 of these key points. First, art is created by gifted and in some way trained persons. Not everybody is an artist. There is a biblical theological basis for this point. Of course, everyone is, as an image of God, able to create something. But there are people who are artists. And we can say in the body of Christ, there are many members, and in the body of society as well, there are many members with their own functions, roles and gifts. This must not necessarily lead to a hierarchy amongst artists and audiences. I think it's not good that there is a realm of art and artists who are almost half gods and then an adoring society. It must not neither lead to a competition between the members, between cultural creators. For the art industry, the cultural world too can be permeated with love of one's neighbor. And it shapes culture if an artist is praising his artwork as a luxury product, or if he is addressing an audience, respecting the audience, even encountering the audience with love. The third point, the appreciation of art cannot be forced, of course not. It will therefore probably always address only a certain segment of society, or better, a certain milieu. There are many milieus in our society with their own ways of loving artworks. Might be good, might be not so good artworks. But the appreciation of even good art cannot be forced. There will be some people who like it and some who don't like it. And it doesn't mean that all art is for everybody. We have to respect this fact as well from a Christian point of view. The fourth point, art should be interpreted to the public at the same time, and particularly in the sense of loving one's neighbor. Then the question of participation should be raised repeatedly. Where does the audience have a space to react, to be involved even in the production of art? Some weeks ago I was in a concert given by our friend Guntas Pranis, who is the professor in the Music Academy of Latvia and the director of this Music Academy. He played and sang in a wonderful way psalms from medieval ages, Renaissance, and he ended the concert with the invitation to the audience to participate and to sing along. This was a very simple but a beautiful way to participate, the audience giving room for being involved. How can art do this? That's a question for us Christians, I think. And how can art be close to lived experience and accessible to those who live far from art? I would like to stop here and just end with one last question. What does this all mean for Christians who are artists? And what does it mean even for churches? Is art luxury? Unnecessary luxury? Does it have its value? Does it bring fruit for an elite? And maybe the elite consists of pupils in an art gallery or church members. How can churches empower artists to make art which is not only just unnecessary luxury? And how can churches as well involve arts, knowing that it is important and that it will be more and more important in our days and in the future? Maybe you spend some more thoughts on this, maybe even with your pastor.